Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. We are very pleased to be joined in the studio today. Well, I say studio, in the online virtual studio with Darren Coxon. And Darren's going to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about himself and the work that he does and his educational journey as well. But just before we get into that conversation, just a reminder, Edufuturist Uprising, 11th of July 2024. It's not too long away now, and we're very excited to be welcoming lots and lots and lots of people there. It's incredible, lots of incredible EdTech partners that are working with us, some wonderfully, highly commended people in 17 different categories of awards, but also a fantastic panel chaired by Ian Phillips looking at the war for teachers and loads of cool stuff. We're very, very excited, and we are glad that so many of you are going to be joining us. If you haven't, and there might still be a few little tickets left, uprising.edufuturists.com is the place to go. Anyway, Darren.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Maybe just give us a little bit of an insight. I know we've met a couple of times, but give us a little bit of an insight into your background and why you're involved in doing what you're doing right now.
Yeah, thanks, but it's great to be here. It's good to see you both. So my background's firmly education. 25th years as an educator. I began life as an English literature and film and media and theory of knowledge theatre teacher. So very much kind of arts and languages and liberal arts. And actually, probably the first 15 years of my career, pretty standard. Became a deputy head, became a head. The last 10 years, I've actually been more involved in managing schools, managing groups of schools. So I've worked as sort of director of education for Brighton College, and my last role was actually as chief operating officer for a group of international schools in Bahrain. So I was based in Bahrain, and I was managing schools in Saudi Arabia and Dubai and Bahrain, but I actually ended up as executive head of a school in Tunisia. And I arrived at the same time that ChatGPT arrived. So I arrived at the school in November 2022. ChatGPT arrived literally almost exactly the same time I did. So it was fate in a way. And the school was doing okay, but it needed a bit of a lift. It just needed something else to kind of get it kind of kick-started. It didn't have a very good COVID, and it lost some expats out of the country. It just needed a bit of energizing. And I realized that actually ChatGPT could potentially be that catalyst. So essentially what we did is we really went all in, and the staff, we trained the staff, and then there were students all using it. And I do look back actually, and this was really early days. We're like talking January 23. I mean, we're say early days, and just over a year ago, but it seems like so back in January. Do you remember 1922? So back in January 2023. We were kind of making it up as we went along. Well, we're sort of making it up as we go along now, but we were really making it up as we went along then. I mean, none of us had a clue what we were doing, including me. And so we probably got away with more than I would do now. So, I mean, for example, all the under-13s were using it. I mean, with teacher supervision, they weren't just going off on their own. I mean, the teachers, but we were allowing some of the younger students to use it. Parents were fine. We got parents' permission. So we did the right things by the school, but looking back, maybe we were a little bit too renegade. But what was really interesting in all this was how it changed the atmosphere in the classroom. Because we started to do quite a lot of project-based learning. And the teachers, I very firmly said to the teachers, do you know what, you're just as much an amateur here as the students in your classroom are amateurs, and you need to reframe your relationship with the students. And actually some of them struggled, but when they got it, totally changed. So interesting, because you walk into a classroom, feel really collegiate, because they'd all be working together on solving these problems, sometimes with AI, sometimes without AI, but it was very much an exploratory phase that we were all going through. And that was really exciting for me. So I then made the decision after I left there last summer, moved back to the UK, to focus my attention on trying wherever possible to help schools to replicate that. What I'd experienced in that year from October, November of 22 through to the end of 2023, when I was interim head of the school, was trying to kind of capture what that DNA was and use what I learned to help other schools. So that's basically what I do now. I'm working all over the shop, speaking at conferences, keynotes, workshops, I've just spent all day online, literally from sort of 8 this morning, just delivering lectures, delivering workshops, face to face and online, really helping schools work out what to do with it. There's nothing more complicated than that. What to do with AI, how to use it really productively, that's going to add value, that it's not going to stress people out. I try and be quite common sense about it. I try not to get too wrapped up in we've talked about this a bit on and off, about people get so caught up in the ethics and the sort of the fear and the doom. And I'm not one of those people. I actually want to try and make it quite, positive and show the optimistic side, but still being mindful of some of the risks.
Yeah, very much so. And I know that conversation around that positive and purposeful use of it, and it's not just like, oh, AI will solve every problem. I know you're not that as well. And a post that you put on very recently, which I super resonated with, was understanding that we don't hide behind it. It works alongside, exactly. And we're very, very transparent and upfront about using it. And I think the problem that comes with lots of technologies is when we think that they are the panacea, or that they are the best thing since sliced bread and they can do all the things. And actually, they're just a tool. And it's understanding that a part of a toolkit and part of a toolbox, or whatever analogy we want to use. So you've told us this story of navigating through the educational hierarchy or pyramid, or whatever else we want to call it, into leadership, and then into that international school and working in those spaces as well. Like, but when it comes to like leading and leading in education, because there's a lot of our listenership is in the leadership space. So we're very fortunate that we get people who are heading up MATs, or they're heading up big schools or colleges, and they're asking a lot of the conversations that we seem to be having are around educational leadership. And is there anything that kind of stands out for you that you've learned in your 25 years in this sector that we probably should learn from in terms of leadership?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the classic one, and I don't think it was him that coined it, but he was the first person to say it to me. I was a deputy head of a multi-academy trust very early in the days of MATs in Cambridge. Parkside Community College. I was the academic deputy there for a few years. And the head there at the time, great guy, who's got the CBE for his services to education. I remember really early on, one of the first things he said to me was, what you need to remember about being a leader is you're only ever as good as the people that you lead. So that, if you facilitate them to be excellent, then you are excellent. If they screw up, that's on you. I often use the Jim Collins mirror and window analogy. I think it's perfect for leadership. If your team get it right, you look through the window and you praise them, even if actually that you facilitated them to get it right. If the team screws up, you look in the mirror and you think, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? How did I not laid the groundwork, whether it be through training, whether it be through motivation, whether it be through given freedom, whether it be through not having the right accountability mechanisms in place, whatever it is, about policies, whatever, that screw up, you need to look at yourself and you need to think, what could I have done differently? How is that a learning experience for me? And I think that's probably my biggest, that's what I carried through all of my leadership career. I've managed dozens of schools. I've built schools. I've bought schools. I've done virtually everything there is to do with schools actually in the last sort of 10, 15 years. And I keep coming back to that. That's literally the thing I will constantly revisit. You genuinely only ever as good as the team beneath you. The other thing that I learned is managing up is much harder than managing down. So I've never been, probably why I'm it's probably why I'm self-employed now. I was never very I remember we talked about this, I think it was at the airport, Ben. I was never a very good employee. And I don't think it was all my fault. It was definitely not all their fault. I'm never going to point the finger and blame my bosses and go, they were all assholes and I was the same. Not at all. I mean, I was not an easy person to manage, and I'm probably still not an easy person to manage. But I definitely initially wasn't very good at managing up, because even if you're at the top of the tree as a CEO, you still have a board to report to. Unless you're funding an operation, you're going to be, or the Prime Minister, you're going to be accountable to someone above you. Okay. And so I think you have to work out, how can you set the environment to ensure that your boss gives you what you need to be successful? Because if you antagonize them, they're just going to screw you over. So that's, I think, where I'm coming from. Managing down, you're only as good as the person you need. Managing up, you need to kind of work with your boss to create, allow the right environment to actually then for you to be successful.
I think it's a really interesting point, actually, because we will obviously dive back into AI specifically for a lot of it. But I think the cultural piece of creating the right environment, but also setting a vision so that when people join your team, organisation, whatever that be, that you are bringing them in not to just say yes, but also they're coming in to bring different ideas and perspectives, to do things because you're recruiting based on what you see an individual's ability to do is exceptional. But also, by giving clarity in terms of the vision, they're not walking into something blind and thinking, I thought I was doing this, and you've now brought me in and you're now telling me to do this. Because that's where a lot of the conflict comes, where the vision and the clarity and the why isn't clear, and you're then walking in and causing conflict. And also, I see a lot of leaders where, for some reason, whether they know it all, whether they want to know it all, or whether they're just cloaked in ego, where they often then say, well, I know you're brilliant, but let me just tell you how I think you should do it. And I was like, people don't recruit absolutely exceptional people and then tell them what to do. What they do is recruit exceptional people and just get out of the way so they can be exceptional. Otherwise, it's a bit of, and that's probably where you are. I've never worked with you. I know Ben knows you a little bit more, but ultimately, some of your conflict and some of the reason why you feel I've not been able to manage up is maybe they brought you in and tried to then tell you what to do.
Oh, yeah,
you were
definitely.
brought in and you thought you were going to do what you thought you were going to do.
Yeah, I generally seem to pick micromanagers. I don't know why, but I just generally seem to pick. I mean, I think it also is part of the system that you go into. So, if I take the Middle East, Bahrain is just one example. Okay, it's just one example of a very bureaucratic system. The countries of the Middle East are deeply bureaucratic. They run on bureaucracy. And I very recently read a book, Humanocracy, which I'm sure you guys may have read. It's brilliant. If you haven't read it, you really must read it. It really sort of digs deep into what bureaucracy is, that it robs us of our individuality. And actually, you're absolutely right, Steve, that when you hire people, you need to hire people and allow them to be them, allow them to be individuals. And if you've got the right hiring process in place, then actually you can step back. And the idea of a vision, actually, is just you're all heading in the same direction. And honestly, the vision in the school is so simple. I mean, we make things so complicated in our schools.
True.
I mean, what do we want? Well, we want kids to be happy. What we want is we want our students and our teachers to want to be in school, not have to be in school. That's it. It's genuinely it. Everything you unpack that one statement, create schools that people want to be in rather than have to be in. Everything else falls out of that. Your vision is to create a school that everybody wants to be. And if you create that space, then actually everything else follows. And then you're going to hire the people who want to be there, and you're going to make sure that they're given the right tools to do the job. So they're not dealing with some bloody interactive whiteboard where the lamp is broken. I mean, that's the basic stuff, or laptops that take a half an hour to boot up, really, or Wi-Fi that doesn't work, really basic stuff. Give them the tools, give them the frameworks. You can do this, you can't do this. And this is what we've collectively agreed. This is our playing field. Just let them play, because then they're going to want to play, rather than giving them the rules and saying, this is what you have to do. And then people just say, well, no, I'm not going to do that. So what tends to happen, they either become passively compliant, or they become what I did, kind of quietly rebellious. And then it always ends badly in the end. So I think that's
loudly rebellious.
Well, I actually then became loudly rebellious and got into even more trouble.
It's rebellious child and compliant child, I think, isn't it, Joe? Rebellious child, at least they're arguing with you in a room. The compliant child is the one that you think you've won over, and they go away and slag you off behind your back. So at least when they're rebellious to you. It's always nothing to do with children. Just on that point, actually, just when you talk about what really education is, and I love that what you said. It's simple, and it is simple. And I remember having a conversation. I think it must have been the last couple of months. I'm getting old now. It might have been about 7 years ago. I don't know, but I'm definitely. I'd say it's recent. And I was having a conversation with an education leader, and it was in compulsory education age, so primary, secondary, in terms of a mixed math. And I had the conversation, and I said, do you feel that if your children had a choice, that they were given a voucher and they could decide where they went to school and where they spent their vouchers on, that they would come to your school when they weren't forced through where they lived, or the fact that the government were funding it, that they were still funding it, but rather than I'm going to go old school, like a HMV voucher, or a Virgin Megastore voucher, that they were given a Love to Shop voucher and they could spend that on education and an education experience wherever they went. I said, do you feel that you would still get the same student number and would still have the same bums on seats? I said, and if not, why wouldn't you run it based on that those students had a choice and they could make a decision to come to you?
Yeah.
Because ultimately that really flips it, like universities.
Yeah.
People can go wherever, technically. I know there's different restrictions and everything else, but imagine if the education system, specifically in England, was run that way, and students got a voucher and they could choose where they went. And it isn't about, I think, maybe go back to that simple vision of what education was, and it's about the young people and actually developing them and making them happy and want to attend, rather than actually how many students don't attend, which is a bigger stat, or attend because they just have to. Which is sad, isn't it, in education? Going because they're forced to do so.
Yeah, no, you're right. But surely that's probably one of the main reasons why education system hasn't changed, because it hasn't had to. Because we're not in most education systems are not competitive markets. Even if you look at just the boarding school system in the UK, it's such a tiny percentage of what 34,000 schools there are in the UK. I mean, it's about 500. Independent there's 500 schools that are kind of competing out of like 34,000. The vast majority of schools in this country are just state funded schools, whether they be academies or grant maintained or whatever, the foundations, whatever they are, they're all government money. They don't have to compete. So as a system, it's anti-competitive. If you look at all of the other kind of sectors in the world, all the commercial sectors in the world, they've had to kind of keep up, and they've had to, maybe even medicine, because there's a big private healthcare sector that's becoming increasingly powerful. But actually, it's the education system. There's been no incentive. There's been no imperative to change. And so that's why I think we just haven't changed, because we haven't needed to. So I think what will happen is, and if it's not coming from above, I think the only way that our system will change is if it comes from beneath. And it will come from essentially, maybe students voting with their feet when they recognise that the system that they've got is worthless. But interestingly, your point about vouchers, it's kind of like the charter system in the US, and that hasn't worked out very well either. So I'm not even sure that's necessarily a good alternative.
No, and I agree, and I think interestingly, it's not necessarily saying it's theoretical as well as much as anything else, isn't it? It's like if a person had a choice, because some parents don't have a choice and don't need a choice; they just get given something. And like in primary school, in most local authorities in the UK, anyway, you're allocated based on distance. And then you can choose to go to a private school if you want to, but you're allocated based on distance. And then there's other elements when it comes to secondary in the UK, based around what type of school it is, if there's siblings there, if you're a looked after child, all them other things. But interestingly, it's that idea about choice, because I regularly talk about my kids on this podcast, and Steve does as well. And I think about my kids wanting to go to school, and that phrase that you said there about them wanting to go to school, I would probably say quite confidently that both of them are getting to a point where they want to go to school for the social elements. I've said this before, but could they get the learning in a more effective and efficient way than they are doing in school? 1,000,000%. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. That's not me slagging off the individual schools. What I'm saying is that the maths that my daughter has to do, being taught by a non-specialist because she's in year 8, and they've run out of maths teachers because they're off sick, and then so they'll get a supply teacher and they'll get a French teacher covering it. Like, she could do way better maths by me facilitating that online. Anyway, we could get into this space quite a lot, but I know that a lot of your the work that you do and that's that's resonating around the world is you're talking about this, like we've mentioned already, this positive and purposeful use of AI tools. I saw another post recently that you've got a certain set of tools that you right now are seen as using as part of your stack, and you're recommending. And I know that will change, because even what we were talking about 3, 4, 5 months ago, that stack would have been different, right?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
when it comes to AI, then whether it's tools specifically or strategic elements around that, what are you seeing, and what would you suggest that people need to consider?
Yeah, again, it's I think what I've begun to be kind of quite well known for is making things very simple and very practical. I try and make everything very simple and very practical. And what I sort of initially started to do is recognize that essentially you can break AI into 3 buckets. Generative AI in school into 3 buckets. AI to do stuff that we can do ourselves. It just does it faster, like lesson plans and schemes of work and resources. It can actually do it better than us a lot of the time, but it does it faster. So AI that sort of replaces what we can do, just more efficient. And then I kind of think, well, actually, what AI can also do, because it's really good at pattern recognition, is analyzing data. We create lots of data in our schools. We don't do much with it very well. So how can we use AI to kind of make more sense of data? And then the last one is how can we use AI to do things that we can't do ourselves? So use it to create interactive. I do crazy things like we do like walking tours of a scene from a novel. Like I'll use AI to take it someone, we can go into a scene from Animal Farm. We can walk around and speak to Old Major and the farm and do some kind of crazy interactives, or a moment in history, or we even do like the human body, where you can kind of do an interactive tour of the human body using AI to kind of guide you through. And the way I kind of see this in if we look back sort of 10, 15 years, which you guys will remember quite clearly, is that SAMR model. That's Ruben Puntedera's SAMR model. And it kind of loosely fits in that you've kind of got the substitution is like generating lesson plans, and then the redefinition is doing a walking tour or using AI text to image to teach grammar. We can't do that without having, we can actually teach parts of speech through text to image. So there are some quite clever things that we can do with AI to kind of replace what we would do in the classroom, but actually just do it differently, maybe do it better. So I think that's kind of strategically when I'm working with leadership teams, when I'm working with schools, I'm saying, right, and even I just did a 2-hour webinar for COBIS, for Council of British International Schools, and I would literally say, right, here's 3 or 4 tools that you can use for creating stuff, and this is how to create a curriculum map and a scheme of work and lesson plans, and it's kind of basic, like level 1 stuff, if you like, through to here's how you use it to have a debate with Donald Trump, or here's how you do it. Use it to create a 3-way dialogue with Clarissa Dalloway and Virginia Woolf, and so it's those sorts of things that you can start to do, where you're working on a continuum from replacing what you can already do, but do better, but through to really doing something kind of a bit wacky. And I think that's kind of what I've probably become more well known for, is just throwing out these kind of, and half the time they don't work and some of the time they do, and I always say, look, it's working for me, it could be a complete failure for you, but have a go. So I would say that probably strategically. In terms of tools, look, I'm not a big fan of using wrappers. I think they're mainly crap. Most of them are pretty useless. So I use ChatGPT, Claude. I don't use Gemini. I just don't think it's very good. I mean, the advanced version's okay. I use Google AI Studio, which is pretty good, because you can upload a video. I mean, you can upload videos now to Google AI Studio, and you can have conversations with a video. It's great. Started to use Notebook LM, because it's really good for uploading masses of documents and you have conversations. For me, the big unlock of AI is having conversations with data sets, whether that be structured data sets like numerical data, or whether that be unstructured data sets like a video or a podcast. You can have conversations with these data sets and actually create, as well as analyzing from those data sets, actually create from them as well. So, and that, honestly, Perplexity I use for research. Well, who doesn't? Everyone loves Perplexity. It's brilliant. That's actually about it. I probably have maybe 5 or 6 tools that I use regularly, but I don't bother with any of the wrappers. None. I mean, literally, Grammarly's the only one that I use, which is sort of a wrapper, but that's it.
Cool. And I suppose that strategic conversation around, and interestingly on that wrapper thing, is that it feels very interesting that a lot of the schools and colleges that I seem to, and you're probably the same, seem to go in and like, oh, we're going to run, and we won't name any, but the wrappers that exist. And by wrapper, we're talking about something that uses OpenAI's large language model or Google's large language model,
exactly.
and then puts here's how to do some lesson plans with this. Here's how to build some.
Press a button, lesson plan generator.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of them. You don't need to name names, but everyone knows who they are.
Yeah, and in that space, like a school or a college thinks that is the solution, because it kind of it is coming back to that point you made earlier, which was that it's almost like they can stand behind it, so they're not really having to use AI. They're trying to find they're almost like using a middleman. It's not them that are having to get into understanding and prompting efficiently and thinking about how to deal with editing and whatever else and put it into their format.
Yeah.
And I get it that it looks really nice because it's now put into a template of a worksheet, or it's put into a Google Slides presentation or whatever else it is. But it feels like we are trying to. Well, there's a lot of people who are trying to make a lot of money out of this from an education perspective, aren't they? And that is the challenge, or one of the challenges, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, basically what they're doing, they're wrapping AI around in the existing system. So, you create a worksheet. I mean, we should ban worksheets. What the hell are we doing with worksheets? Seriously. I mean, and literally any AI that creates a worksheet should be just banned from the world. From the world. I mean, it's just worksheets are I mean, my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, super clever girl, Hills Road in Cambridge, doing really, really well, loves her subjects. She said to me last year when she was she's now in sixth form college, and when she was at the secondary school last year, she said, "Dad, do you know what my history teacher did the other day?" I said, "What?" She said, "Well, she had a 2-page worksheet, and she asked us to stick the worksheet in our exercise book." I thought, "What?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "What do you mean, like stick it?" She said, "Yes." I said, "What about?" She said, "Yeah, I know." So a 2-sided worksheet. Wrap your head around that bullshit. I mean, 2-sided worksheet, and you stick 1-sided. That's the mentality. That's the worksheet mentality. So we need to move away from that. And if we start using AI in this kind of interactive way, but as soon as we bring a wrapper in, we're not doing that. We're just We're not even reinventing. We're just repeating the same tired. It's just, rather than using Twinkle, we're using some wrapper.
And interestingly, with that as well, I think you're right. It's perpetuating a system that is not the happy place that we were talking about, the place where children are happy and want to be. It is just keeping them engaged. Well, I don't even think the word's engaged, entertained or
supervised. Not even entertained, supervised, babysat and supervised. That's it.
And that's sad, really, isn't it? And I think that conversation of, if they want to be there, if you then, like you said, if you can create that type of schooling system where the people who work there want to be there, and the children who go to it, or the young people that go to it, want to be there, and then from that, okay, because you want to be there, that means it's giving you some level of agency and autonomy. It's giving you some kind of choice, and your curriculum is based around things that really matter, as opposed to things that some old white blokes in a ivory tower somewhere have decided is really important.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, I had a conversation with a group of startups recently, so edtech startups who are in this space of trying to navigate the education piece. And one of the things he said to me was about, well, do you think the curriculum needs to change? Now, I had to sit on my hands a little bit because I was like,
bite your tongue.
Don't give them, don't just hold some cards close.
My response would be, what do you think?
Well, I did, to be fair. I said, well, and there were different age groups in this room. So there was guys in their 50s. There were some youngish 20-year-olds are in that space. I'm now in my 40s, and all these people, like, they're all in that space. And I said, you tell me about what school was like for you. And then somebody else goes, oh yeah, I learned about that. And it was 30 years previous.
Yeah,
and you're thinking to yourself, and then automatically people go, surely we're not still learning the same X, Y, and Z in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that it's an interesting thing. Now, obviously, one of the things that you And this is not a wrapper in that sense, because actually you are encouraging people to do this themselves, and you're showing them how to do it.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
the learning chatbots?
Yeah,
See
yeah,
a
yeah,
lot about that, and helping people build their own
yeah.
way of interacting. Would you just give us a little bit of an insight there? Because that isn't a
Yeah,
wrapper.
sure.
That is
No.
encouraging people to do it in their own way,
Well,
right?
what you're actually doing is creating your own wrapper. So, I mean, basically, all a wrapper is a further layer of instructions and training on top of the base model. So, if you just take like ChatGPT, like the GPT 4.0 model, or the Claude's Sonnet, or whatever, it doesn't really matter, or the Llama 70 model. You know, there are a bunch of models, and you can sit them here, and then you can build on top of them. What a wrapper does is it just someone else has done that for you, but you don't know what that layer is. You see, the problem I have is you don't know what's gone into that layer. So you've got no control, no agency over that layer. So essentially, you've allowed someone else to dictate what a lesson plan should look like, or what an interaction with the student should look like. I think what I've tried to do, I call them course bots, but I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just a name. Essentially, what it is, it's a base model like a Claude or a ChatGPT, where what you do is you put a behavior prompt over the top, and then you give it some knowledge. So the GPT is the classic example. So ChatGPT, you can create GPTs. It's a very similar thing to that. The difference, two main differences. Well, first, it is not all OpenAI. You can actually use other models, so that's quite good. Because even though the 4.0 model is still probably the best, it's quite expensive to run, and you know, it's not always suitable for everything. So it does give you the option of using all of the Claude models, all of the ChatGPT models, Mixtral, Mistral, two Llama models. So it gives you lots of different choices, which I think is quite powerful. And then essentially all you do is you can just share via a website. You know, you can create a subdomain, or you can embed the bot on a web page or whatever. I even found out this morning, because I was just doing the research for the COBIS course this morning. I even found out you can stick, this is the first time you'll hear this here first, you can stick the embed code into a Gamma deck, and you can open up the chatbot inside of Gamma. That was like, well, what? Because I thought, I wonder if this will work. Put the embed code into Gamma, tap the button, and sure enough, the chatbot comes up. So you can even embed a chatbot inside of a Gamma deck. So they're quite versatile. So I think, but the other reason I think this is quite powerful, you can share this bot with students. They don't have to sign in. They don't have to put any of their details in. It's not, it's not capturing their contact details at all. So they literally can you just give them the web page, or give them the web page with the embed or the subdomain, and they just use the chatbot. But what I found is really interesting is that if you hit it right, and you keep it really narrow, it's really powerful. So one example, I literally just trained the bot on one poem, just one poem from one poet, and it just seemed to become such an expert on that a guy friend of mine really drilled down into it, and he's a real expert on this particular poet, like a real authority on this poet. And he pushed this bot as hard as he could, and he said it's brilliant. He said the stuff it was unlocking was absolutely remarkable, because it was really focused in on just one thing. So I think actually, we've got these very general chatbots. Actually, the advantage of these particular sorts of bots is you can make them, literally, you can just train it on one exam. So it's only focusing on that one exam, and every interaction keeps coming back. You can try and distract it, but you can create the behavior prompt so it keeps circling back. I want to talk about my feelings. Well, we could talk about your feelings, but actually, let's talk about the poem. Politely, but it keeps pushing you back in, which I actually think is a companion to students when they're doing homework or they're revising for exams. I think it could be really, really useful.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it could, and I think you'll be seeing that increasingly, how people want to customize. And I think this is the conversation that we're trying to have at the moment is this: we know, and many of us have been saying for hundreds and hundreds of times that, like, we can't do one size fits all. Here's a curriculum, everybody does it, and we don't do that. the reality is yeah, we might have a national curriculum, but the teachers are the ones that are breaking their backs, going, that kid needs it slightly different, or that group of students need it different, and they're breaking their backs trying to create this differentiating material or personalized or whatever else. What we're saying now is we can use these kind of tools to really make this curriculum, even if we agree that there is a standard curriculum that people, I don't necessarily agree with that, but even if we did in this space, we can still then customize it and personalize it individual for the people that need it.
Yeah. So look, what I mean, big question I ask people is, why do we have what are the organizing structures that we have in schools? Okay, so we have curriculum maps, schemes of work, lesson plans, policies. They are organizing structures. They're things that we hang the school off. Actually, because of the way that generative AI has been trained, it's trained as a pattern recognizer and it's trained on structure. So it has these structures inbuilt. If that's the case, we don't actually need, we can probably in future do away even with timetables. That's another one, classic organizing structure in the schools, timetable. Actually, what we do is we create endpoints and we give them tools and we give them training on how to use those tools to reach that endpoint. And that's actually almost it. Because if you think that if you know that you build a chatbot which is going to take them through step by step from where they are to where they need to be, let's say they're doing a project around SDG 4, around sort of, right to education, and they know that the endpoint is they need to create X artifact that ticks boxes A, B, and C. They kind of know that because that's the rubric. How they get there and who they get there with, there should be a degree of choice. So what that actually does is it eliminates the kind of lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, a lesson of history, a lesson of geography, towards you've got to organize yourself to solve problems, real world problems, and through the act of solving those problems, you're going to learn the things it's just classic project-based learning. I mean, it's been around forever. But I actually think that what AI will do is what unlock project-based learning, because it will become the structure, the channel within which you can actually push students along towards the end point. But then how they're getting there, as I said, it's going to be largely up to them. So that's what I'm hoping will start to happen. We'll actually see more and more schools realizing in the next few years that we don't actually need timetables and we don't need lesson plans and we don't need schemes of work. We just need kind of structures, project-based learning kind of structures, and we need architects for those structures, and almost like project managers. I almost see like the deputy head becoming like a project manager. And so we start to see students working towards an endpoint that's an agreed endpoint, so they're not all going off in totally different chaotic directions. But actually, they're going to get to it, rather than all being pushed along one channel, they're going to kind of get to it in slightly more, meandering, but they're all going to get there in the end. But they're all going to learn the things they need to learn when they need to learn them.
I love that. I love when you integrated it with. I think the biggest shift that I'm hoping will happen is that education will be completely reimagined by artificial intelligence, rather than, you talked about the wrappers and the fact that we're asking it to create lesson plans and plenaries and starters, and some of those bits are key. But what I like there is, how can you create aspects using artificial intelligence that will help potentially a gap in teacher knowledge, in the education, the fact that we might not have enough teachers, and the chatbot will help guide and prompt and support students and facilitate their learning. When they're off doing projects, they might just come back and ask a question to then say, the teacher's busy over there, or the facilitator, or whatever we're going to call them in the future. I think I'm going to get absolutely battered for saying teachers won't exist in the future, but I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they're going to be so busy helping and supporting potentially those people that are really struggling with a concept, that some of those high flyers can ask a question, or a bot, or an instance where they just ask simple questions based on a gap in their knowledge of the project they're doing or the activity they're doing, and that will feed them bits of information that will then help them go, you don't need to give me any more. I can go off and I can continue with my project because it's helping me. Just those bits of it. And it's like, and again, I'm not criticising teaching assistants or anything else, but I think it's moving into that age of, how are we supporting students differently to to not just pass an exam. And when teachers are so busy and they might have 40 in a class, how can we use artificial intelligence to inspire, to engage, to do different things? And one of those is to build a repository where they can ask simple questions verbally, visually, whatever medium or mode that they do, and it will give information back to support them.
Yeah, you're right.
I remember it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago, having a conversation, and I said, I love getting students to deliver a project back to me and saying, create a video to do it. And it wasn't an argument or like a massive conflict, but the person didn't understand. They said, but if you get them to focus on making a video, they're not going to spend all the time learning about that subject, because they're going to spend, and they were saying, oh, you research. Whenever somebody mentions research, I always say, well, can you send me the link? But they said, oh, research shows that if they do it and create the video, their knowledge and their time is spent on learning how to create a video rather than Henry VIII. And I said, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't really remember much about Henry VIII. But I'd love to know how to create a video, or somebody will show me how to create a video, because that's probably a skill that I probably needed when I got into beyond education. And I think we've just lost sight. So I think that's great how we can give skills, that holistic education, and also use AI to then maybe shift the model away from what we've currently got. I think it was built for a different purpose.
I mean, when you think about the learning process, again, I mean, I'm not going to go into learning science. People hide behind learning science. It drives me mad. Well, the learning science says, well, does it? Yeah, but then learning science a few years ago was talking about learning styles, and where are we with those? You know, if you look at the kind of just the simple process of learning, what is it? You're here, you need to get to there, and there are things that stop you from getting there. You know, there are blocks. There are blocks to your progress in learning. I mean, classic is you're learning a language. You're learning a new language. You need to learn vocabulary. That's a block. You need to learn words. You need to memorize these words. I think your point, Steve, is really important, because actually, if you look at the traditional system, education system, the student will learn stuff and absorb stuff in the class, then they will do like a homework, and then they'll have an exercise book, and they'll give the exercise book to the teacher, and a week later the teacher gives it back. So, and they've got some 5 wrong out of 10 questions, they've got 5 wrong. But it's been a whole week from them making the mistake to them actually learning what the mistake they made. That's a waste of time. What you actually want is you want the students to be able to understand at that moment what it is they're doing wrong, and then how they can put it right. So this is why I think having a little companion bot where you can have a question, you can write a little paragraph, you can introduce it to the AI, and it can say, oh, that was quite good, but you need to work on this, this, and this. That actually then becomes an unlock really quickly. I remember way back to 10 years or so ago when I brought, we were the first, the school I was working at, the first school to bring iPads in one-to-one in a sixth form. So we started with the sixth form. We were the first sixth form to do so. It was back in 2011. And I actually remember working with Google Drive and Google Docs. And students in the class would be writing an essay in Google Docs. And of course, because you can see what they're writing, I'd have their essays open on my iPad, and then I'd be going in, and as they were writing, I'd be sort of typing in. Maybe add an example in here. I mean, they loved it. Like, I'd be typing, they'd stop, they kind of look at me and like, you're right, you're writing on my essay. I'm like, yeah. But that was really powerful, because actually I was interceding at the moment they were creating they were showing their learning. And actually we can do that with AI. If AI is able to say, actually pause there, you're going slightly in the wrong direction, come back this way. I actually think that's going to be incredibly powerful. So getting that in-time feedback, not the kind of final summative feedback, because AI is still not good. I wouldn't ever trust an AI grade, giving it a grade of 1 to 9. I just wouldn't do it. I just think it's not very good at that. And it will be, but it isn't at the moment. But at the moment, it's very good at just giving the students these little tips as they're working, just to help them on their journey.
Yeah, very much so. Now, it's always important for us to we're very vocal about our thoughts, and you've heard us probably talk about some very things being join the revolution and education. We were led to believe that education needs it will evolve to meet the needs of students, but it hasn't, and it needs so we've talked about this, about revolution in its nicest sense, but obviously the whole conversation of a revolution suggests something quite dramatic and disruptive. And I know that you've talked a lot about how important it is to be careful in this revolution conversation and scrapping things out, because obviously we hear you. So my question really is not is it revolution or evolution? The question is like, how do you see it that way? Because we don't think it's either or, and I think, but obviously, if we're to fall down a side, we think that a lot of change needs to happen. So maybe if you could talk at that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think, look, I change my mind every other day on this, because I think that's just the nature of the beast, isn't it? If you look historically, evolution's generally done better than revolution over history, but we're talking about millions of years rather than hundreds of years. You know, revolutions tend to be very disruptive and actually very anxiety inducing. And, you know, there's been research done into the psychological impact of revolutions on populations, and it's not particularly pretty. I mean, everyone goes rah, 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 revolution. Then they're like, okay, there's been quite a lot of damage done. I think that the danger is that when we talk about revolution and disruption a lot as part of the education narrative, we can actually sow seeds of anxiety amongst the very people that we want to get on side. That they can start to feel maybe a bit of FOMO, like, oh, everyone else is disrupting and I'm not. You know, every other school. I mean, I don't know about you, Ben, but the number of schools I speak to who they're like, we're nowhere way behind. I'm like, you're not actually not. You're really not. I mean, 95% of the schools in the world have not even started to look at AI. So seriously, just the fact you're looking at it now means you're not way behind the curve. But there's a lot of FOMO at the moment. If we start banging the disruption drum too much, the danger is that we start to create anxiety amongst the school populations. They're like, and then what tends to happen? People are like, well, I can't do it. You know, I'm not going to give up. I'm not even going to bother. So that's why I think we need to be a little bit careful. Having said that, I do agree with you that something has to give. Okay. One of the things I say is at the moment, there is no room in our schools for innovation. There's no room. There's no room for AI. There was no room for iPads. There's no room for there's no room for project-based learning. There's no room for kind of portfolios over exams. There's just no room in our current education system. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to make room. So I actually think that what we should be doing strategically, which is why I always say, whenever I start talking, again, this is probably something that resonates with you. Often it will be the head of AI that will be the first person to approach me. Like they'll send me a LinkedIn message, or the deputy head that has been given the responsibility for AI. They'll be the first person. And I've had 3 conversations in the last 2 weeks with heads of AI. Every single one of them has been a head of IT. And it's not an IT thing. AI is not. AI is a language and a communication and collaboration and a critical analysis thing. It's not an IT thing at the level of school teachers. I mean, go into the background, of course it is, but at the level of school teachers. And they're not necessarily the right people to carry the message forward. So I always say, okay, and then they'll always say to me, I'm showing people how to use these tools, but no one's doing anything about it. No one's actually. And I'm like, well, it's because you've not got the right people in the room. And so I say, right, the next person I want to talk to is your head teacher. And I said, I've become quite bolshy about this. I said, well, there's not really much point in me moving forward with you as a school unless the next conversation I have is with the head, because they need to buy in. They need to kind of understand the direction of travel. So I think, you know, to the point about sort of disruption, evolution versus revolution, I actually think that what we need to do is start with the top down. I hate saying it, but it is kind of top down, and say to the head, right, you can't ignore this. It's like John Cotter's establishing a sense of urgency. Like the first point is 8-point change leadership process. First point, establish a sense of urgency. That sense of urgency has to come from the head. Okay, can't come from the head of IT. No one's going to listen to the head of IT. People listen to the head, and certainly the governors as well. Establish a sense of urgency. Get the right people in the room, right people on the right seats on the bus, and then start to look at the whole thing and say, right, how can we make space for AI? What needs to give? What needs to be abandoned? What are we doing that's adding no value to our students' education? I think if we start there, then I think we will see some sort of revolution, because it will be kind of almost like a quiet revolution. What I don't think will happen is suddenly we have the Labour government's not going to come in and say, right, we're banning exams, and it's just political suicide. So I think, again, we need to be it's common sense, I suppose. We're not going to completely change the education system overnight, but if we can just work one leader at a time, then I think maybe we can start to make baby steps towards the change we all want the change, let's face it.
Yeah, we do. we do, and we can't come fast enough for a lot of us because our children are still in this space.
Yeah, exactly.
And our children and our grandchildren are in it. So yeah, no, we love that, and I know that what you're doing and how having these kind of difficult conversations are super important. So we're grateful that people will have them conversations because it is tough. We always finish. I say always. We started in January doing this. We've been doing this 8 years, but always now finish with some quick fire questions. Now, you are the first person that we have asked these quick fire questions, these new quick fire questions to.
Okay.
So we've had some different ones, and we've revamped them. So I'm going to ask.
No pressure.
No, I'm going to ask the first question. Steve will ask the second question, and I'll finish with a third question. Just 3 quick fire questions.
Okay.
So here we go. First one is about future workspace skills or workforce skills. It says there. So you've got a crystal ball. So in 5 words, what's the single most important skill that students will need to thrive in the future workforce?
Building trust with others.
Nice. So quick.
That was 4. That was 4.
Yeah, but that's fine. You were that quick that Steve couldn't even unmute himself quick enough.
Couldn't. Love it. Trust.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. So imagine a completely transformed education system. Pick one surprising element. That could be robots. VR might come back, or stay, or go more deeper, or something else entirely. Tell us what it is and why it excites you.
So I think future learning spaces will involve co-working and learning spaces where we'll have families able to turn up together. Parents can work, students can learn. They can come together to eat. They can do activities together. They can learn how to grow stuff in a garden. I actually think that's where education becomes really powerful, because we move back to how it was before the Industrial Revolution, sort of pre-Industrial Revolution, where we actually create community spaces where learning and working and collaborating and cohabiting go together hand in hand.
Love it. And final one.
Not VR, but not VR. I hate VR. I don't mind AR. It's fine. VR, no, definitely. I want to ban VR. I hate it.
So rather than drinking a real can of pop, that you can step into VR and pretend to drink a can of pop. Do you know? Is that not exciting?
Don't listen to don't. He's winding you up.
I know.
It's quick fire. Here we go. And the final one is this. So, what do you see the biggest challenge then being to this future of education in the next 10, 20 years?
Competing vested interests. They're too intertwined. Universities, exam boards, governments. There are so many vested interests. There are so many fingers in the pie. Unraveling that, really, good luck to us.
For sure. Well, Darren, it's been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be. I know we've been trying to get this to happen for a while, but everybody's traveling and whatever else. So we're really grateful for you joining us. And I know that you are going to be with us, hopefully, having conversations.
I really hope so. I really
I know that there's
hope
conversations up there in July at the Edufuturists Rising.
Yeah, that's the plan.
And you are nominated. And I know that.
I'm so grateful. Really, whoever nominated me was really kind.
So congratulations on that, and hopefully we'll get to see you up there in July. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome.
Another episode of the Edufuturists podcast, and if you haven't done already, please make sure, if you're listening, that you like and subscribe, share this, tell everybody about it, and then one day this future of education might actually become a reality. Thanks everyone.
Guys.